It's 490 BC. You're standing on a dusty plain near a small Greek village called Marathon. Behind you, the sea crashes against the shore where hundreds of Persian warships sit like predators waiting to strike. In front of you stands the most powerful military force the world has ever seen. 25,000 battle-hardened warriors from the Persian Empire, an empire that stretches from India to Egypt, from the frozen steppes to the scorching deserts. And who stands against them? You do. You and 9,000 other Greek farmers, merchants, and craftsmen. You're not professional soldiers. You're citizens. And today you're going to face down an empire. This is the story of the Battle of Marathon, the day when everything changed. The day when a handful of Greeks proved that courage, strategy, and the love of freedom could defeat overwhelming power. This is the battle that saved Western civilization, inspired the Olympic marathon race, and sent shockwaves through the ancient world. This is how 10,000 Greeks destroyed the Persian Empire. But before we get to that epic clash, we need to understand how we got here. Because this battle, it was decades in the making. Let's rewind to the late 6th century BC. The world has never seen anything like the Persian Empire. Founded by Cyrus the Great, a man so legendary that even his enemies praised him, and expanded by his successors Cambyses and Darius I, this empire is the superpower of the ancient world. We're talking about an empire that stretches from the Indus River in modern-day Pakistan all the way to the Aegean Sea in Greece. From the mountains of Afghanistan to the sands of Libya. It encompasses dozens of different peoples, cultures, and languages. It's wealthy beyond imagination, with gold pouring in from all corners of the known world. At the helm sits Darius I, the King of Kings, as he styles himself. And that's not just propaganda. Darius is a master organizer, a brilliant administrator, and a ruthless conqueror. He's divided his empire into satrapies, provinces ruled by governors loyal to him. He's built the Royal Road, a highway system that allows messages to travel across his empire faster than anyone thought possible. His armies are legendary, seasoned, professional, and equipped with the best weapons and armor money can buy. To Darius, the world is his to command. Every nation, every people should bow before the Persian throne. It's not just about power, it's about order. The Persians believe in something called Asha, divine order, cosmic truth. And the King of Kings? He's the enforcer of that order on earth. Resistance isn't just rebellion, it's chaos, a violation of the natural way of things. So when we talk about the Persian Empire, we're not just talking about a big country. We're talking about a worldview, an ideology that sees Persian rule as inevitable, natural, and divinely ordained. And on the western fringes of this vast empire sit the Greeks, a collection of quarreling city-states who refuse to accept Persian authority. To Darius, they're an irritation, a problem to be solved. And soon there'll be much more than that. The year is 499 BC. Along the coast of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, live Greek city-states that have fallen under Persian control. These are the Ionian Greeks, culturally and linguistically Greek, but subjects of the Persian Empire. And they're not happy about it. Fed up with Persian taxes, Persian governors, and Persian interference in their affairs, the Ionians do the unthinkable. They revolt. And they don't do it alone. They reach out to their cousins across the Aegean Sea for help. Most Greek city-states ignore them. It's too dangerous, too far away, not their problem. But two cities answer the call: Athens and Eretria. They send ships, soldiers, and supplies to support the Ionian rebellion. Together, the rebels march on Sardis, the capital of the Persian satrapy in Asia Minor. They storm the city and burn it to the ground. Now, here's the thing: militarily, this doesn't accomplish much. The Persians regroup, crush the rebellion over the next few years, and restore order with brutal efficiency. Cities are razed, populations are enslaved, and the Ionian revolt ends in disaster. But the burning of Sardis? That's personal. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, When Darius heard about the burning of Sardis, he was furious. Not just angry, personally insulted. These Greeks, these insignificant troublemakers on the edge of his empire, had dared to strike at Persian territory. They had burned a Persian city, killed Persian officials, and challenged the authority of the King of Kings. Herodotus tells us that Darius had a servant whose sole job was to remind him 3 times a day, "Master, remember the Athenians." Whether that story is literally true or not, it captures something essential. Darius wasn't going to let this go. The Athenians and Eretrians had made themselves enemies of Persia. And in the Persian worldview, enemies must be punished. Not just defeated, annihilated, made an example of, so that others would never dare to resist. The stage was set. Persia would come for Greece. It was only a matter of time. While Persia is a unified empire under one ruler, Greece in 490 BC is a completely different world. There's no Greek nation, no Greek empire, just a patchwork of independent city-states, each fiercely proud of its autonomy. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and dozens of smaller cities share a common language, worship the same gods, and celebrate the same festivals like the Olympic Games. But politically, they're as divided as can be. They compete, they quarrel, they even go to war with each other. The idea of uniting against a common enemy is almost unthinkable. Their military systems reflect this independence. Unlike Persia's professional standing armies, Greek city-states rely on citizen soldiers. These are the hoplites, men who own enough property to afford their own armor and weapons. They're not full-time warriors. They're farmers, craftsmen, merchants who train for war but spend most of their time working their land or running their businesses. The hoplites' equipment is iconic. A bronze helmet that covers most of the face. A bronze breastplate or layers of linen armor called a linothorax. Bronze greaves protecting the shins. And most importantly, the hoplon, the large round shield that gives the hoplite his name. It's made of wood covered in bronze, and it's heavy, about 15 to 20 pounds. The primary weapon is the dory, a spear about 7 to 9 feet long, perfect for thrusting in close formation. As a backup, they carry a short sword called a xiphos, used when the spear breaks or when fighting gets too close for spear work. But here's what makes the hoplites truly formidable. They don't fight as individuals. They fight in a formation called the phalanx. Imagine a wall of bronze and wood, shields overlapping, spears bristling forward like the quills of a porcupine. Each man's shield protects not just himself, but the man to his left. You can't break ranks. You can't run. Because if you do, you expose your comrades to death. The phalanx is terrifying to face head-on. It's a grinding, pushing, stabbing mass of bronze and iron that can break almost any enemy foolish enough to meet it directly. But it has weaknesses. It's slow. It's inflexible. If you can flank it, attack from the sides or rear, or draw it out of formation, it falls apart. And that's the Greek situation as Persia prepares to invade. They have brave soldiers, excellent infantry tactics, and fierce independence. But they're outnumbered, outgunned, and divided. Against the might of Persia, their chances look grim. For Persia, this should be easy. For Greece, this looks like the end. In 492 BC, Darius launches his first major expedition to punish Greece and bring it under Persian control. He puts his son-in-law, Mardonius, in command of a massive force, tens of thousands of soldiers supported by hundreds of warships. The strategy is straightforward. March along the northern coast of the Aegean, through Thrace and Macedonia, securing Persian control over the region, and then push south into Greece proper. It's the land route, slower but safer, allowing the army to be supported by the fleet sailing parallel along the coast. At first, things go well. Mardonius successfully reasserts Persian authority in Thrace, forcing local tribes to submit. The Greek cities of the northern coast, seeing the size of the Persian force, wisely decide not to resist. The juggernaut rolls forward. But then disaster strikes, not from Greek warriors but from nature itself. As the Persian fleet rounds Mount Athos, a jagged peninsula jutting into the Aegean, a sudden, violent storm descends. Winds howl, waves tower, and the sea becomes a churning nightmare. Ship after ship is dashed against the rocks. Hundreds of vessels are destroyed, thousands of men drown, horses and supplies are lost to the depths. Meanwhile, on land, Thracian tribes, emboldened by news of the fleet's destruction, launch guerrilla attacks on the Persian army. Mardonius himself is wounded in the fighting. His campaign, which had seemed so promising, grinds to a halt. The expedition limps back to Persian territory. Mardonius has secured some territory in the north, but the main objective, punishing Athens and Eretria, remains unfulfilled. Darius is not pleased. But he's not deterred either. If the land route is too risky, if the weather is unpredictable, then they'll try a different approach. This time, Persia will strike directly across the sea. 2 years later, in 490 BC, Darius assembles a new invasion force. This time, he's learned from his mistakes. No more marching through hostile territory. No more exposing the fleet to dangerous coastlines. This expedition will sail directly across the Aegean, island hopping until it reaches its targets. Command of the expedition goes to 2 men. Datis, a Median general with extensive experience, and Artaphernes, Darius's own nephew. They're given a fleet of about 600 triremes, the ancient world's premier warship, sleek and deadly, carrying perhaps 25,000 to 30,000 soldiers. Ancient sources inflate these numbers much higher, but modern historians estimate the force was roughly this size, still more than enough to overwhelm any Greek city. The army is diverse, representing the full breadth of the Persian Empire. Persian and Median infantry form the core, experienced, disciplined, and loyal. They're equipped with wicker shields reinforced with hide, short spears, curved swords called aconakes, and powerful composite bows. They favor mobility and ranged combat over the heavy, close-quarters brawling of Greek hoplites. Supporting them are contingents from across the empire. Scythian horsemen from the steppes, masters of mounted archery. Bactrians from Central Asia. Even Egyptians and Greeks, yes, Greeks, from the Ionian cities now firmly under Persian control, forced to fight against their cousins. But the real terror of this force is the cavalry. Persian horsemen are legendary, swift, skilled, and deadly. Armed with javelins and bows, they can circle an enemy formation, peppering it with missiles, then charge in to exploit any weakness. On the open plains, Persian cavalry is almost unstoppable. The mission is clear and brutal. First, destroy Eretria as punishment for aiding the Ionian revolt. Then, move on to Athens and burn it to the ground. Finally, secure the rest of Greece and bring it into the Persian fold. It's not just a military campaign, it's a statement. Defy Persia and this is what happens to you. The fleet sails west, island by island, accepting the submission of anyone smart enough not to resist. Then they arrive at Euboea, the large island where Eretria sits. The city prepares for a siege. Eretria fights bravely. Its walls are strong, its citizens determined. For days the Persians assault the city, and for days the Eretrians hold. It looks like the siege might drag on, costing the Persians valuable time and resources. But then betrayal. Some Eretrians, perhaps seeing the writing on the wall, perhaps bribed with Persian gold, open the gates from within. The Persian army floods into the city. What follows is brutal and methodical. The Persians sack Eretria, tearing down its temples, looting its treasures, and enslaving its entire population. Men, women, children. All are bound in chains and sent east to Persia, never to see their homeland again. The message is unmistakable. This is what happens to those who resist the King of Kings. Now, with Eretria destroyed, the Persians turn their full attention to Athens. They need a landing site, somewhere with enough space to deploy their massive army, flat ground for their cavalry, and easy access to Athens itself. They choose Marathon. The plain of Marathon, about 26 miles northeast of Athens, is ideal for Persian purposes. It's a broad, flat coastal plain, perfect for deploying large numbers of troops, and especially for the cavalry that makes up such a crucial part of the Persian battle doctrine. Mountains hem it in on three sides, and the sea lies to the east, where the Persian fleet can anchor safely. From Marathon, the Persians can march directly on Athens. Or they can simply wait. Wait for the Athenians to come to them, then crush them in open battle. Either way, Athens is doomed. Or so it seems. When word reaches Athens that the Persian fleet has landed at Marathon, panic grips the city. This is it. The moment they've dreaded. The most powerful empire in the world has come for them, and they are woefully unprepared. Athens can muster about 9,000 hoplites, every able-bodied citizen who can afford armor and weapons. That's it. No cavalry. No archers to speak of. Just heavy infantry. They send desperate messages to other Greek city-states, begging for help. Most cities refuse or ignore the plea. They're too far away, too scared, or too busy with their own problems. But one small city answers the call, Plataea. This tiny ally, grateful for past Athenian support, sends about 1,000 hoplites to fight alongside Athens. It's a token force, but it's something. It means Athens isn't completely alone. The Athenians also send a runner, a man named Miltiades, to Sparta, nearly 150 miles away, to beg for help. According to Herodotus, Miltiades runs the entire distance in just 2 days, an almost superhuman feat of endurance. He delivers his message to the Spartan assembly. The Persians are here. If Athens falls, you'll be next. We need your help. The Spartans listen sympathetically. They want to help. They respect Athens as a fellow Greek state, and they understand the Persian threat. But, and this is a big but, they're in the middle of the Carnea, a religious festival honoring Apollo. During the Carnea, Spartan law forbids the army from marching to war until the festival ends at the full moon. They promise to come as soon as the festival is over. But that won't be for several more days. The Athenians are on their own. The Athenian army, led by 10 elected generals called strategoi, marches out to Marathon. They take up a defensive position blocking the main road back to Athens, choosing ground at the edge of the plain near the foothills. From here, they can watch the Persians and prevent them from marching on the city. Among the Athenian commanders is a man named Miltiades. Unlike most Greeks, Miltiades has actually lived among the Persians. Years earlier, he had ruled a small territory in the Thracian Chersonese as a Persian vassal before fleeing back to Athens when his position became untenable. He knows how the Persians fight. He knows their strengths and, crucially, their weaknesses. For several days, the two armies stare at each other across the plain. Neither side wants to make the first move. The Persians are waiting for the Athenians to give up and go home, or for political factions within Athens to betray the city. They're in no rush. They have supplies from their ships and time is on their side. Plus, their cavalry needs rest and water after the sea voyage. The Athenians are waiting too, hoping that the Spartans will arrive in time, or that some opportunity will present itself. But with each passing day, the situation grows more desperate. What if the Persians sail around to Athens while the army is stuck here? What if traitors within the city open the gates? The Athenian commanders debate fiercely. Some argue for caution. We're outnumbered. We should wait for the Spartans. Others, led by Miltiades, argue for immediate action. Every day we wait gives the Persians more options. We need to attack now on ground of our choosing. The decision falls to a man named Callimachus, the Polemarch, a high-ranking military official whose vote will break the tie. Callimachus listens to both sides. Then he makes his choice. He sides with Miltiades. The Athenians will attack. Miltiades knows that a straightforward charge into the Persian center would be suicide. The Persians have superior numbers, and their archers would cut the Greeks to ribbons before they even reached the enemy lines. Worse, the Persian cavalry could sweep around the flanks and encircle the Greek formation, turning the battle into a massacre. So Miltiades devises a plan brilliant, risky, and completely unconventional. Normally, a Greek phalanx fights in deep ranks, 8, sometimes 12 men deep, with the strength concentrated in the center. The center pushes forward, trying to break through the enemy line while the wings protect the flanks. Miltiades does the opposite. He thins out the center of the Athenian line to just a few ranks deep, enough to hold but not enough to push forward aggressively. Meanwhile, he reinforces the wings with the best troops he has, making them much deeper and stronger than usual. Why? Because Miltiades is counting on the Persians doing exactly what they always do, exploiting weakness in the center. When the thin Athenian center inevitably starts to buckle under Persian pressure, the Persians will push forward eagerly, thinking they're about to split the Greek army in two. But that's when the trap will spring. The reinforced wings, made up of heavily armored hoplites, will smash through the lighter Persian flanks, then will inward and surround the Persian center. It's a pincer movement, a double envelopment, the same tactic Hannibal would use centuries later at Cannae. It's genius. It's also incredibly dangerous. If the center breaks too soon, if the wings can't crush the Persian flanks fast enough, if the cavalry returns at the wrong moment, the entire plan collapses and the Athenian army is annihilated. But Miltiades has one more trick up his sleeve. He's noticed something crucial. The Persian cavalry isn't on the field. Whether they're watering their horses, being held in reserve, or preparing to board ships for a flanking maneuver around Athens, they're not in position. This is the opportunity. If the Athenians are going to attack, it has to be now. Dawn breaks over the plain of Marathon. The Athenian army forms up, 9,000 Athenians and 1,000 Plataeans, arranged in their modified phalanx, shields locked, spears leveled. Across the field, the Persian army waits, confident and relaxed. What are these Greeks going to do? Charge across a mile of open ground? That's suicide. Miltiades gives the order. The Athenians begin to advance. At first, it's a measured march, shields up, maintaining formation, the rhythm of thousands of sandaled feet tramping in unison. The Persians watch with curiosity, then alarm. Are they really doing this? Then, at a signal from Miltiades, the Athenians break into a run. Herodotus tells us they sprinted nearly a mile across the plain, heavily armored men running at full speed toward the enemy. To the Persians, this must have seemed insane. No one does this. Heavy infantry doesn't sprint in formation. They'll be exhausted before they even reach the line. They'll collapse. They'll break. But the Greeks don't break. They're not untrained rabble. They're citizens defending their homes, their families, their freedom. Every man in that line knows that if they lose today, Athens burns. Their wives and children will be enslaved. Everything they've ever known will be destroyed. So they run. Shields raised high to deflect arrows. Bronze helmets gleaming in the morning sun. A war cry rising from 10,000 throats, echoing across the plain like thunder. The Persian archers loose their arrows. Hundreds, thousands of arrows arc into the sky and rain down on the charging Greeks. Some find gaps in the armor, throats, thighs, arms. Men fall screaming, tumbling to the ground. But the line doesn't stop. The phalanx keeps coming, a wave of bronze and fury. And then they hit. The collision is catastrophic. The front ranks of the Greek phalanx crash into the Persian lines with the force of a battering ram. Spears punch through wicker shields and into flesh. The tightly packed Greek formation, moving at full momentum, smashes into the looser Persian ranks like a hammer hitting an anvil. The Persians are skilled warriors, make no mistake. They've conquered half the known world. But they're not equipped or trained for this kind of brutal, close-quarters fighting. Their shields are lighter, their armor thinner, their spears shorter. Against the weight and discipline of the Greek phalanx, they're at a disadvantage. On the wings, Miltiades' plan works perfectly. The reinforced Athenian flanks, packed with heavily armored hoplites, smash through the lighter Persian troops stationed on the edges. The Persians there, made up of subject peoples and lighter infantry, simply can't hold. They're pushed back, cut down, driven toward the sea. But in the center, it's a different story. Just as Miltiades predicted, the thinned-out center of the Athenian line struggles. The best Persian troops, Persians and Medes, the elite of Darius's army, concentrate their attack here. They push forward aggressively, and the Greeks, outnumbered in this section, start to give ground. Step by step, the Athenian center bends backward. Dust and blood choke the air. The clash of bronze on iron rings out, a deafening cacophony of war. Men scream, curse, pray. Bodies fall, trampled underfoot. For a moment, just a moment, it looks like the Persian breakthrough is coming. If they can split the Greek line here, they can roll up the Athenian flanks and turn the battle into a rout. But Miltiades has planned for this. He's counting on it. As the Persian center pushes forward, focused on the weakening Greeks in front of them, they lose their peripheral awareness. They don't see what's happening on their flanks. They don't realize they're walking into a trap. On both wings, the victorious Athenian hoplites have finished destroying the Persian flanks. Now, instead of pursuing the fleeing enemy, they do something extraordinary. They pivot inward. Like two great bronze doors swinging shut, the Athenian wings will toward the center of the battlefield. The Persians, who thought they were winning, suddenly find themselves attacked from three sides. Panic sets in. What had been a battle becomes a massacre. The Persians in the center, hemmed in by their own numbers and now surrounded by Greeks on three sides, have nowhere to go. Hoplite spears stab from every direction. Men stumble over their own comrades, falling, trampled, crushed. The formation disintegrates. Soldiers drop their weapons and run, but there's nowhere to run to. Behind them is the sea. To the sides are more Greeks. Ahead is only death. Herodotus describes it simply. The Persians were surrounded and cut down in heaps, those who can flee toward the ships. The plain becomes a nightmare of pursuit. Greeks chase down fleeing Persians, cutting them down from behind. Bodies litter the field. Wicker shields, broken spears, and shattered bows lie scattered like debris after a storm. Near the shore, desperate Persians try to reach the safety of the ships. Some wade into the surf, clinging to ropes as the ships push off. Others drown under the weight of their armor. The water turns red with blood. The Athenians, filled with battle fury, pursue right to the water's edge. They even manage to capture 7 Persian ships before the fleet can fully withdraw, an almost unheard of feat for a land army. When the dust finally settles, the numbers are staggering. According to Herodotus, the Persians lost 6,400 men that day, more than a quarter of their entire force. The Athenians? 192 dead. Among them was Callimachus, the polemarch who cast the deciding vote to attack. He died as he lived, fighting for his city. The contrast is almost unbelievable. Against overwhelming odds, the Greeks have achieved total victory. The mighty Persian expedition has been shattered. The empire that conquered nations has been humbled by a small band of citizen soldiers. But even in victory, there's no time to celebrate. Because the war isn't over. Even as the Athenians stand victorious on the blood-soaked plain, a new danger emerges. The Persian fleet, though bloodied, is still intact. And now it's setting sail, not retreating but moving south toward Athens itself. The Persian strategy becomes clear. While the Athenian army is pinned at Marathon, the fleet will sail around Cape Saunion and strike the undefended city. If Athens falls while its army is celebrating 26 miles away, all the sacrifice, all the courage, all the victory at Marathon will be meaningless. Miltiades realizes this immediately. There's no time for rest, no time for burial rites, no time to tend to the wounded. He gives the order that seems impossible: march back to Athens. Now. And so begins one of the most extraordinary forced marches in military history. The Athenian hoplites, exhausted from battle, wounded, some barely able to stand, put one foot in front of the other and start marching. They're still in full armor, 30 to 50 pounds of bronze and wood. Their muscles scream. Their feet blister. Blood seeps from wounds. But they march, 26 miles. The same distance that would later become the marathon race. But this isn't a race, it's survival. They march through the heat of the day, through rugged terrain, up hills and down valleys. No one falls out of line. No one stops. Because they all understand, if they don't reach Athens first, everything they fought for dies. It's in this context that the legend of Phidippides takes on new meaning. Some versions of the story say that after the battle, a runner, perhaps Phidippides himself, the same man who had run to Sparta, was sent ahead to warn Athens of the approaching fleet and announce the victory. He runs the full 26 miles. When he finally reaches Athens, he bursts into the assembly, gasps out a single word, "Nenekamin, we have won," and collapses dead from exhaustion. Whether this story is literally true or symbolic, it captures the desperation of that moment. Everything hung by a thread. Every second mattered. The Athenian army, somehow, impossibly, reaches Athens before the Persian fleet. When the Persian ships round Cape Saunion, expecting to find an undefended city ripe for the taking, they instead see the Athenian army, bloodied, exhausted but unbroken, drawn up in defensive formation, shields gleaming, spears ready. The Persian commanders, Datis and Artaphernes, face a choice: attempt an amphibious assault against fresh defenders, or admit defeat and sail home. The morale of their troops is shattered. Their army has been destroyed. The element of surprise is gone. They choose to sail home. The invasion of Greece is over. For now, Athens erupts in celebration. Against impossible odds, they've not only survived but triumphed. Word spreads quickly across Greece. The Persians, the unstoppable empire that crushed the Ionian revolt, that conquered Egypt and Babylon, have been defeated by a small city-state. The dead are honored with a burial mound on the plain of Marathon, a tumulus that stands to this day. The names of the 192 fallen Athenians are inscribed on stone, immortalized as heroes who gave their lives for freedom. The Plataeans who fought alongside them are honored too, their loyalty never forgotten. For the Greeks, Marathon becomes more than just a military victory. It's proof that they can stand against Persia. It's validation of their way of life, free citizens fighting for their homes versus subjects fighting for a distant king. It's a rallying cry that will echo across Greece for generations. Even the Spartans, who arrived a day after the battle, acknowledge the magnitude of what Athens has accomplished. They march to Marathon, view the battlefield, inspect the Persian dead, and pay their respects to the Athenian warriors. From that day forward, Marathon becomes legendary, a symbol of courage, strategy, and the triumph of freedom over tyranny. But for King Darius in distant Persia, Marathon is a humiliation that burns like acid. The empire that subdued nations from India to Egypt has been repelled by a collection of Greek farmers. It's unacceptable. It's unbearable. It threatens the very prestige upon which Persian power rests. Darius immediately begins planning a new invasion, not a punitive expedition, but a full-scale conquest. This time, he'll lead it himself. This time, he'll bring such overwhelming force that no Greek city-state will dare resist. He'll turn Greece into a Persian province, and the name Athens will be erased from history. But fate has other plans. Before Darius can launch his grand campaign, rebellion breaks out in Egypt. Then, in 486 BC, before the Egyptian revolt is even fully suppressed, Darius dies. The crown passes to his son Xerxes. Xerxes inherits his father's empire and his father's obsession. Marathon must be avenged. Greece must be conquered. The preparations begin for an invasion that will make the Marathon expedition look like a scouting party. Xerxes will bring hundreds of thousands of soldiers, thousands of ships, and enough supplies to sustain a multi-year campaign. The Greeks know he's coming. And Marathon has taught them something crucial. They can win. But only if they stand together. The stage is set for the next chapter of the Greco-Persian Wars, Thermopylae, Salamis, Plataea. But all of those battles, all of those heroic stands, trace their roots back to that dusty plain where 10,000 Greeks faced down an empire and refused to surrender. Let's talk about Miltiades for a moment, the architect of this impossible victory. Because his story doesn't have a happy ending, and that tells us something important about ancient Athens and the nature of democratic politics. After Marathon, Miltiades is the hero of Athens. He's celebrated in the streets, honored by the assembly, his name on everyone's lips. He's proven his brilliance as a commander and his loyalty to Athens. He's the man who saved the city. But success in Athens is a double-edged sword. The same democratic system that empowered citizen soldiers also made leaders vulnerable to political rivals and public opinion. You're only as good as your last victory. Miltiades, flush with success, convinces the Athenians to fund an expedition to the island of Paros, claiming it had supported the Persians and deserved punishment. Some historians think he had personal grudges or was seeking plunder to pay off debts. Whatever the reason, the expedition is a disaster. The siege of Paros fails, Miltiades is wounded, and he returns to Athens empty-handed. His enemies pounce. They put him on trial for deceiving the people and wasting public resources. Despite his service at Marathon, despite saving Athens from annihilation, he's convicted. He's fined an enormous sum, 50 talents, an almost impossible amount to pay. Before he can even pay the fine, his wound becomes infected. Gangrene sets in. Miltiades, the hero of Marathon, dies in disgrace and agony, a broken man. He's barely 50 years old. It's a harsh reminder that in democratic Athens, glory is fleeting and the people's favor is fickle. But despite his tragic end, Miltiades' legacy endures. His strategy at Marathon becomes studied by military commanders for centuries. His name becomes synonymous with tactical genius and audacious courage. Marathon doesn't just save Athens, it transforms it. Before Marathon, Athens is just one Greek city-state among many, not particularly powerful or influential. After Marathon, everything changes. The victory gives Athens enormous prestige across the Greek world. They're the city that stood alone against Persia and won. They're the defenders of Greek freedom. This moral authority allows Athens to take a leadership role in Greek affairs, something that would have been unthinkable before. More importantly, Marathon validates the Athenian democratic system. In most Greek city-states, power rests with aristocrats, oligarchs, or tyrants. Athens is different. Power theoretically rests with all male citizens. And at Marathon, it was citizen soldiers, not professional warriors or aristocratic cavalry, who won the day. The message is clear. Free men fighting for their own freedom are superior to subjects fighting for a king. Democracy doesn't just work. It wins battles. This gives tremendous confidence to the democratic faction in Athens and helps cement democratic reforms that might otherwise have been rolled back. Marathon also teaches Athens a crucial military lesson. They need a navy. After all, the Persian fleet almost succeeded where the Persian army failed. If the Athenians hadn't won the footrace back to Athens, the fleet could have taken the undefended city. In the years following Marathon, a brilliant Athenian statesman named Themistocles pushes for a massive naval building program. Using silver from newly discovered mines at Laurium, Athens constructs hundreds of triremes, transforming itself from a land power into a naval superpower. That navy will prove crucial 10 years later when Xerxes finally launches his massive invasion. At the Battle of Salamis, the Athenian fleet will be the backbone of the Greek naval force that defeats the Persians again. But the Athenians only build that fleet because Marathon taught them they could defeat Persia, and showed them they needed to control the seas to do it. As years pass and memories fade, Marathon doesn't diminish. It grows in the telling. It becomes not just a battle but a legend, a foundational myth for Greek identity and eventually for Western civilization itself. The oath the Athenians supposedly swore before the battle, never to surrender, never to abandon their dead, always to defend freedom, becomes part of Athenian civic religion. Young Athenians are taught about Marathon in school, told they must live up to the standard set by their grandfathers. The burial mound at Marathon becomes a pilgrimage site. Athenians claim that on anniversaries of the battle, you can still hear the clash of arms and the cries of warriors echoing across the plain, the ghosts of those who fell defending Greece. Marathon enters the work of poets, playwrights, and historians. Aeschylus, one of Athens' greatest playwrights, fought at Marathon as a young man. On his tombstone, he doesn't mention his plays, arguably the greatest tragedies ever written in ancient Greek. Instead, he wants to be remembered for fighting at Marathon. Herodotus, writing his histories a generation later, devotes substantial space to Marathon, preserving details that might otherwise have been lost. He interviews veterans, collects oral traditions, and ensures that future generations will know what happened on that plain. The battle becomes a touchstone for Greek identity. When the Greeks argue about politics, someone will invoke Marathon. When they debate strategy, they'll reference Miltiades' tactics. When they need inspiration, they'll remember the 192 who fell defending their city. And here's the thing, it works. When Xerxes invades 10 years later with an army so vast that Herodotus claims it drank rivers dry, the Greeks don't immediately surrender. They remember Marathon. They know the Persians can be beaten. That knowledge, that confidence, born on the plains of Marathon, helps them stand at Thermopylae, fight at Salamis, and ultimately triumph at Plataea. It's worth stepping back and considering Marathon from the Persian point of view, because their interpretation of events is very different from the Greek version. From Darius's perspective, the Marathon expedition is a relatively minor operation that encounters an unexpected setback. Yes, they lose a battle and several thousand men, but the Persian Empire is vast. They have millions of subjects, hundreds of thousands of potential soldiers. The loss at Marathon is annoying, but hardly catastrophic. What matters to Darius is the principle. Athens defied the King of Kings and got away with it. That cannot stand. It sets a bad precedent. If Athens can burn Sardis and escape unpunished, other subject peoples might get ideas. The empire's authority rests on the perception of invincibility. So from the Persian viewpoint, Marathon isn't a decisive defeat that ends their ambitions in Greece. It's a temporary setback that makes the eventual conquest of Greece even more necessary. This helps explain why Xerxes, when he finally invades in 480 BC, brings such overwhelming force. He's not taking any chances. He assembles what may be the largest army the ancient world has ever seen. Estimates range from 200,000 to over 1 million men, though the truth is probably somewhere in between. Xerxes bridges the Hellespont with boats so his army can march from Asia into Europe. He digs a canal through the peninsula where Mardonius' fleet was destroyed. He stockpiles supplies along the invasion route for months in advance. This isn't a punitive expedition, it's a conquest. And initially it works. Xerxes smashes through northern Greece. At Thermopylae, his forces overcome the legendary 300 Spartans and their allies. He captures and burns Athens, exacting the revenge Darius never got to claim. But the Greeks, inspired by Marathon, don't give up. They lure the Persian fleet into the narrow straits at Salamis and destroy it. They reform their armies and, at Plataea, defeat the Persian land forces decisively. Xerxes is forced to retreat, leaving Greece independent. And why? because marathon taught the Greeks they could win. From a purely military perspective, marathon is a masterclass in tactical innovation and psychological warfare. What Miltiades accomplishes is studied in military academies to this day. First, there's the decision to attack at all. Conventional wisdom says you don't attack a larger, better-equipped force on open ground. You defend, you wait for reinforcements, you avoid battle until you have an advantage. Miltiades does the opposite, and it works because he understands something crucial. The strategic situation favors action over caution. Second, there's the modified phalanx formation, weakening the center while strengthening the wings. This is counterintuitive and risky, but it's based on a deep understanding of how both Greek and Persian armies fight. Miltiades knows the Persians will exploit any weakness they see, and he turns that aggression into a trap. Third, there's the sprint across the plain. Running heavy infantry across a mile of open ground toward an enemy should result in your troops arriving exhausted and disorganized. But Miltiades calculates that the time saved, the reduced exposure to archery, is worth the fatigue. He's right. Fourth, there's the discipline required to execute the pincer movement. When the wings crush the Persian flanks, the Athenians don't pursue in a disorganized chase. They will inward in formation, maintaining their cohesion. That level of control in the chaos of battle is extraordinary. Finally, there's the forced march back to Athens. Miltiades understands that tactical victory is meaningless without strategic follow-through. Winning the battle at Marathon means nothing if Athens falls while the army celebrates. So he drives his men to the edge of human endurance to secure the strategic objective. Every one of these decisions could have failed. Any one of them going wrong could have turned victory into catastrophic defeat. But Miltiades reads the situation perfectly, takes calculated risks, and executes brilliantly. Commanders throughout history study Marathon. Hannibal's double envelopment at Kenny echoes Miltiades' tactics. Alexander the Great studies the battle during his education. Roman generals reference it in their planning. Even modern military theorists analyze Marathon for insights into morale, maneuver warfare, and the importance of terrain. We need to talk about Phidippides and the Marathon race, because the story has become so iconic that it deserves its own section, and because separating myth from history reveals something interesting about how legends are born. According to Herodotus, Phidippides is the Athenian runner who races to Sparta before the battle to beg for help. He covers about 150 miles in 2 days, an almost superhuman feat, but not impossible for a trained long-distance runner. Herodotus even adds a detail where Phidippides claims to have encountered the god Pan along the way, who promises to help Athens. But Herodotus doesn't mention Phidippides running from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory. That story comes from later sources, Plutarch, writing 600 years after the battle, and Lucian, writing even later. They tell of a runner who brings news of the victory to Athens, gasps out, "Nenechamen, we have won," and drops dead from exhaustion. Some versions conflate the two stories, having Phidippides make both runs, first to Sparta and back, 300 miles total, then immediately after the battle from Marathon to Athens, 26 miles, then dying. That would be around 350 miles of running over just a few days while wearing armor in summer heat without modern hydration or nutrition. It's almost impossible. So what's the truth? We don't know for certain. The run to Sparta definitely happened. Herodotus is generally reliable about major events. The run from Marathon to Athens might have happened, but the details are less certain. The dramatic death? That could be embellishment added later to make the story more memorable. What we do know is that the story captivated imaginations. In 1896, when Greece hosted the first modern Olympic Games in Athens, the organizers wanted to include an event that connected to ancient Greek glory. They created the marathon race, roughly 26 miles, the distance from Marathon to Athens, to honor the legendary runner. The first Olympic marathon was won by a Greek shepherd named Spiridon Lewis, who became an instant national hero. The race was so popular that it became a permanent fixture of the Olympics and eventually spawned the modern marathon running phenomenon. Today, millions of people around the world run marathons every year. Most have no idea they're commemorating an ancient battle. The name marathon has entered common language as a metaphor for any long, difficult endurance challenge. We have movie marathons, charity walkathons, dance marathons. All of this traces back to a battle fought 2,500 years ago and a runner, whether real or legendary, who gave everything to bring news of victory home. So why does marathon matter? Why do we still talk about it 2,500 years later? Why does it rank among the most significant battles in human history? The simple answer is this: if the Persians had won at Marathon, Western civilization as we know it might not exist. Think about what happens if Athens falls in 490 BC. The Persians install a friendly tyrant, garrison the city, and use it as a base to subjugate the rest of Greece. Sparta fights, perhaps, but without Athenian support and the moral example of Marathon's victory, the Greek resistance likely crumbles. Greece becomes a Persian province. The democratic experiment in Athens ends before it really begins. There's no golden age of Athens, no flourishing of philosophy, drama, and art. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they're never born, or if they are, they live as subjects of Persia, not free citizens of an independent city-state. The Roman Republic, when it rises centuries later, doesn't have Greek culture, philosophy, and political theory to draw upon. Roman law, literature, and government develop differently, if they develop at all in the same way. Fast forward to the Renaissance. Without the rediscovery of Greek and Roman texts, the intellectual revolution that transforms Europe might never happen. The Enlightenment, built on Greek philosophical foundations, takes a different path. The American founding fathers, who drew heavily on Greek and Roman political theory, create a different system, if they create anything at all. This is not to say that without Marathon, humanity would still be in the Dark Ages. History doesn't work that simply. But Marathon preserves something crucial: the idea that free people governing themselves are worth fighting for, and that citizens defending their freedom can overcome seemingly impossible odds. That idea that democracy is worth defending, that self-governance is preferable to subjugation, that ordinary people have extraordinary potential survives because Athens survives. And Athens survives because of what happened on that plain in 490 BC. Beyond the grand historical significance, Marathon is a story about people. Individuals making choices in moments of extreme pressure, facing fears, summoning courage, and dealing with the consequences. Imagine being an Athenian citizen soldier on the morning of the battle. You're not a professional warrior. Maybe you're a farmer, a potter, a merchant. You've trained with your neighbors, drilled in the phalanx, but this is your first real battle. And your opponents? The army of the mightiest empire on earth. You know the odds. You've heard the stories about how the Persians crushed the Ionian revolt, about what they did to Eretria just days ago. You know that if you lose, your city burns, your family is enslaved, everything you've ever known is destroyed. And yet, when the order comes to advance, you do. When the order comes to run across open ground toward an enemy twice your size, you run. When the arrows start falling and men around you drop, you keep going. When you crash into the Persian line and the real horror of close combat begins, you fight. Why? What makes someone capable of that? Part of it is training and discipline, the countless hours of drill that turn individual men into a cohesive unit. Part of it is social pressure. You can't let down your friends, your neighbors, the man whose shield protects you. But the biggest part? It's knowing what you're fighting for. You're not fighting for conquest or glory or because a king commanded it. You're fighting for your home, for your right to govern yourself, for your freedom. That's what gives the Greeks their edge at Marathon. That's what allows them to do the impossible. Not superior equipment or tactics alone, but the conviction that what they're fighting for is worth the sacrifice. And that's the human element that makes Marathon transcendent. It's not just a military victory. It's a testament to what people are capable of when they're fighting for something they truly believe in. Marathon is just one battle in a longer conflict, the Greco-Persian Wars that stretch from the Ionian Revolt in 499 BC to the final peace in 449 BC. But it's the battle that changes everything. Before Marathon, the Greek city-states see Persia as invincible. The empire has never been seriously challenged. It crushed the Ionian Revolt with ease. It conquered Egypt, Babylon, Lydia. Why would Greece be any different? After Marathon, the Greeks know better. They've seen Persian soldiers flee. They've seen Persian commanders retreat. They've proven that clever tactics, strong morale, and good leadership can overcome numerical superiority. This knowledge sustains them through the dark days of Xerxes' invasion. When Leonidas and the 300 Spartans make their stand at Thermopylae, they're buying time for the same reason the Athenians fought at Marathon, because they believe Greece can win. When Themistocles lures the Persian fleet into the straits at Salamis, he's using the same principle Miltiades used at Marathon: turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. The massive Persian fleet, cramped into narrow waters, loses its advantage and gets destroyed. When the Greeks unite to face the Persian army at Plataea, they're drawing on the confidence Marathon gave them. They know the Persians can be beaten in open battle. And they win. Again and again, against all odds, they win. By 449 BC, when the Peace of Callias is finally signed, Persia gives up its claims on the Greek cities of Asia Minor and agrees to stay out of the Aegean. The Greeks have not just survived, they've won their independence and security. None of that happens without Marathon. Marathon is the spark that lights the fire of Greek resistance, the proof of concept that makes everything else possible. As with any legendary battle, Marathon has accumulated its share of myths, exaggerations, and propaganda over the centuries. It's worth separating what we know from what we suspect or hope. The numbers, for instance, are hotly debated. Ancient sources give wildly different figures for the Persian force. Herodotus suggests around 25,000, but some later writers claim hundreds of thousands. Modern historians generally agree that 25,000 to 30,000 is more realistic for the Persian force, simply because you can't supply or transport a much larger army with the ships available. The Athenian casualties, 192 dead, are probably accurate. That's a specific number, and the Athenians kept careful records. They built a burial mound that still exists, and they knew exactly who fell. But the Persian casualties, 6,400 according to Herodotus, might be inflated. Ancient historians often exaggerated enemy losses and minimized friendly casualties. Still, the Persians clearly suffered heavy losses, probably in the thousands. The story of the weakened center and reinforced wings makes tactical sense and is generally accepted by historians. But some details, like exactly how the charge unfolded, or specific conversations between commanders, are likely reconstructed based on probability rather than eyewitness accounts. The supernatural elements, Pan appearing to Phidippides, ghosts fighting on the Greek side, divine intervention, are clearly mythological additions. They tell us what the Greeks believed about the battle's significance, but not what actually happened. What we can say with confidence: the Athenians, badly outnumbered, attacked the Persian force at Marathon. They used innovative tactics to overcome their numerical disadvantage. They won a decisive victory that forced the Persian expedition to withdraw. And that victory had enormous strategic and psychological consequences. The rest, the specific details, the heroic embellishments, the legendary elements, may be less certain, but they're part of what makes Marathon more than just a battle. They're part of why it's become a founding myth of Western civilization. In the year 490 BC, on a dusty plain near the village of Marathon, something extraordinary happened. 10,000 Greeks faced down an empire and refused to surrender. They fought not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. They fought not for conquest or glory, but for freedom. Against impossible odds, they won. And in winning, they preserved something precious: the idea that free people can govern themselves, that ordinary citizens can achieve extraordinary things, that courage and clever strategy can overcome brute force. Marathon teaches us that size isn't everything. That morale matters. That fighting for something you believe in gives you strength beyond your physical capabilities. That innovation and bold action can overcome conventional advantages. It teaches us that one battle can change the course of history. That individuals, Miltiades devising his plan, Callimachus casting his vote, the hoplites charging across the plain, make decisions that echo across centuries. Most importantly, Marathon teaches us that freedom is worth fighting for. Not abstract freedom, but the concrete, specific freedom to govern yourselves, to make your own choices, to live according to your own values. The men who fought at Marathon weren't superhuman. They were farmers, craftsmen, merchants. They were ordinary people facing an extraordinary challenge. They were scared, tired, outnumbered, and outgunned. But they stood. They fought. They won. And 2,500 years later, we still tell their story. We still run races named after their battle. We still study their tactics in military academies. We still invoke their example when we talk about courage, strategy, and the defense of freedom. Because Marathon isn't just ancient history. It's a reminder that when ordinary people unite for a cause they believe in, they're capable of extraordinary things. It's proof that the underdog can win, that clever strategy beats brute force, that freedom is stronger than tyranny. On that plain in 490 BC, 10,000 Greeks changed the world. They saved Western civilization, inspired countless generations, and proved something that still resonates today. That courage, discipline, and the love of freedom can overcome any obstacle. That free people fighting for their homes are unstoppable. That one moment, one decision, one battle can change everything. That is the legacy of Marathon. That is why we remember. And that is why, 2,500 years later, we still say, the Greeks stood against impossible odds. And they won.